ready to lead on the global stage. Before we begin this session, I'd like all you to take a moment to reflect on how the Union Budget 2025-26 has supported students and consider its impact throughout the academic journey. I'm confident that we are all keen to gain valuable insights into the Union Budget from experts in this field. This session presents an excellent opportunity to understand its implications across various sectors. Before delving into today's discussion, I'm privileged to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have with us Professor M. Govinda Rao, who is former member of the 14th Finance Commission and non-resident senior fellow, National Council of Applied Economic Research. He was earlier the director of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy and is now an emeritus professor there. His past positions include director, Institute for Social and Economic Change, and fellow Research School of Pacific and Asian Studies, Australian National University, Canberra, Australia, and professor at National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. He was also a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India, a member of Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission and High-Level Expert Committee on Universalizing Healthcare, member, High-Level Expert Committee on Efficient Management of Public Expenditure, advisory group of eminent persons to advise the Finance Minister on G20 matters. His past advisory roles include chairman of the Committee for the Implementation of Value-Added Tax and chairman, expert group on taxation of services. He is a member, Board of Governors in Institute of Economic Growth, Institute for Social and Economic Change, and Madras School of Economics. Dr. Rao's research interests include fiscal decentralization and federalism, state and local finances, tax policy and reforms, public expenditure management. Professor M. Govinda Rao is presently the chairman at Karnataka Regional Imbalances Redressal Committee. May I now request Professor M. Govinda Rao to please come on to the dais. Good morning, sir.
Thank you.
I kindly request Dr. Shilpa Kalyan, HOD of DLHS, to come forward and present a sapling to Professor Rao as a token of her appreciation. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. We're also delighted to have Dr. Rumki Majumdar. She is the director and an economist at Deloitte, India. She writes on several contemporary economic and sector-specific issues related to India with a focus on policy implications on industries such as consumer, financial services, energy and resources, technology and public services. She has also written on numerous economic issues about the United States and several emerging economies for Deloitte in Insights in the past. She currently heads the Client and Insights research team and regularly advises Deloitte's India's executive leadership on Indian economic outlook. Her expertise lies in macroeconomics and industry research, developing thought leadership and economic forecasting using statistical and econometrics model. In her 16 years of professional journey, she has published over 100 publications in business and academic journals as well as in public media publications. I request Dr. Rumki Majumdar to come onto the dais. May I request Dr. Swati Shivanam to come forward and present a sapling to Dr. Rumki as a gesture of our gratitude. Thank you, ma'am. We are honored to have here with us today Dr. Gayathri Vasudevan. Dr. Gayathri built the Sambhav Foundation with a vision to enable livelihoods and to enhance the quality of life of vulnerable communities through education, employability, and entrepreneurship. Her mission was to touch millions of lives, empower youth, men and women to earn a decent living and become micro entrepreneurs. She has been extensively involved in policy issues and community mobilizations relating to labor and livelihoods, leading to recognition and accolades across the globe. Dr. Gayatri was cited as one of the top 50 women in Business by Business Today, a leading magazine in India in the year 2017, and Entrepreneur of the Year in Social Business category by Forbes India in 2018. She's also a recipient of Niti Aayog Women Transforming India Award for 2021. She has been a TED speaker several times between 1999 and 2007. Dr. Gayatri worked for the International Labour Organization, a United Nations agency. She is a member of Central Apprenticeship Advisory Committee under the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. In 2024, she was given the Sabera Changemaker Award. She has a doctorate in development studies with 30 publications in the area of labor, employment, and gender issues to her credit. I request Dr. Gayatri to come onto the dais. Oh, okay. I now request Professor Anushri to come forward and present the sapling to Dr. Vasudevan as a symbol of her gratitude. We're also thrilled to have Mr. V. Sridhar with us today. Mr. Sridhar is a trained economist who specializes in economic journalism and has been in the field for almost 4 decades, of which he spent 30 years working for the Hindu group of publications. He started his career with the Press Trust of India in New Delhi in the 1980s, where he was part of a group that established the economic research cell there. During the 3 decades with the Hindu and Frontline, he has extensively covered some of the major economic issues of this period. He wrote extensively about the security scandal of 1990s, popularly known as the Harshit Mehta scam, and delivered a scoop that unveiled the scandalous dimensions of the Enroll deal, which the government was forced to cancel because of the onerous conditions demanded by the now defunct company. He has also written extensively on the privatization in India, including a recent series on the privatization of the life insurance corporations. Since his retirement from the Hindu group as associate editor, Mr. Sridhar continues to write. Most recently, in the last week, he has written an article on the latest union budget, focusing on the Indian railways, and another on the significance of the new Chinese AI entity DeepSeek. May I now request Mr. V. Sridhar to come onto the dais. I now request Professor Kedar Vishnu to come forward and present the sapling to Mr. Sridhar as a token of her appreciation. I would now like to invite Dr. Kedar Vishnu, Associate Professor DLHS, to give us a brief introduction to the theme for today's discussion. It is also my pleasure to introduce one of our moderators, Mr. Raghuveer Badrinath. Mr. Raghu comes with 15 years of experience in business journalism, having held senior editorial positions at globally renowned media houses based in India and the United States, including Business Standards, The Times of India, News Corp, and Reorg. He specializes in analyzing economic cycles and their impact on the corporate sector, as well as exploring the complex fields of alternative investment management. Mr. Raghu has managed bureaus across the Pacific and the Atlantic, focusing on the intricate details of distressed debt, corporate restructuring, private equity funds, leveraged buyouts, and mergers and acquisitions. He is currently working on strategies to foster sustainable livelihood, improvements for marginalized tribal communities in hostile geographies through innovative financial inclusion solutions. May I now request Mr. Raghuveer Badrinath to come onto the dais?
I'm here. Thanks.
I now request Professor Kedar Vishnu to come forward and present the sapling to Mr. Raghuveer as a token of our appreciation.
No issues.
Thank you so much, sir.
I would now like to invite Dr. Kedar Vishnu, Associate Professor, DLHS, to give us a brief introduction on the themes for today's discussion.
Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon. Professor Govinda Rao, Committee, the member of 14 Finance Commission and former Director of ISEC and NIPFP. Dr. Rumki Majumdar, Director of Deloitte. Dr. Gayathri Vasudevan, the Chairperson of LabourNet. Mr. Sridhar from Frontline. Mr. Raghuveer Sir. And Dr. Shilpa Kalyan, the head of the department, Dr. Swati, the program coordinator, faculty members, and young and future scientists. I welcome you for this panel discussion. I'm sure more than me, you all are excited to listen to them, correct? We are very grateful to all of you for accepting our offer. And it is an honor to have such a distinguished panelist with us today, and I'm excited about the valuable insight that will emerge from the discussion. Now, this panel discussion we just started, this is the second time, we started last year. So we had Professor Charan Singh, Professor Bhanumurthy, and Dr. Padmini Ram. Last year we had 3 distinguished panelists. Now, this year we are continuing the same series, and this year we had a pre-panel talk, and now this is a panel discussion. And immediately after this panel discussion, we have the student presentation. And I'm very happy that this time we have come up with, Arthaniti Vimansh. This initiative is completely led by the students, and we are giving the platform for the student to listen the panel discussion, to understand, and then apply their knowledge of the budget with some sector and come up with a very rigor level of analysis. So we are promoting this, and soon on 25th, we'll be having this competition, so that we really want to encourage the youngster to understand the budget. Now, I'll not take much of the time, but probably I'll talk about why this is very important for us to understand the budget, particularly for the young economics. Just 31st, Jan, the economic survey has come, and if you see the progress of our economic survey, for the financial year 24-25, we have progress with 6.4% of the growth rate. And if you see the prediction of the IMF and the World Bank, which was 7%. Now, we should be very proud that we have achieved 6.74% growth rate, and we are one among the leading country in the world to achieve the high growth rate. But along with the high growth rate, one should not just look at the size of the GDP, and one should look at the per capita income. That's what Professor Govinda Rao has been writing in various newspapers. Now, one very unique thing about this budget is that, this is the first time the government was very serious about the Viksit Bharat. This has been reflected by the finance minister speeches. Also, it has been reflected in the economic survey. Now, this is the first time government want to make it clear what is the vision of achieving the Viksit Bharat. Now, if you look at the economic survey, it has, highlighted that to achieve the Viksit Bharat, we need to grow at 6%, 8% per capita income. And this is not for 1 year, but many decades. Then only will become the Viksit Bharat. Now, this panel discussion, after giving this background, there are two important questions which we are exploring from this panel discussion. Number one, is the current GDP rate is sufficient for us to have our vision of Viksit Bharat? Number two, how we are going to shift our economy. Presently, we have 2,500 per capita income, and how we are going to, achieve the $14,000 per capita income to call us as a Viksit Bharat. So we'll try to understand the vision of government and whether we have really done something very new in this particular budget to achieve our goal of Viksit Bharat. Number two, there is a lot of focus has been given on, by the finance minister about promoting more of investment, about promoting all the sectors. And you might be, of course, as an economics student, there is a huge increase in inequality. And if you look at the inequality, the top 1% of the people have contributed somewhere around 13%, and the share has gone up by now somewhere around, it is somewhere around 33% in 2023. So just last 50 years, I think there is a huge increase in inequality. Now, we also want to explore from this union budget how we are going to, bring the inclusive growth from all the sector. So this is a great platform for all of us to know how the finance minister has planned to promote all the sectors in the economy. I'll just not take more time now. Just there are 2 points. There is a lot of uncertainty in the world. The tariff rates, the President Donald Trump has called us as a tariff king. Rupees value has gone down. Now, you can see that in the union budget. One of the players is to improve the export. Now, considering the lot of uncertainty in the world, how we are going to really increase the export from India, that is what we are trying to understand from this. And the last, which is very important and very close to my heart, is agriculture. Now, Dr. Shilpa had asked me to speak for 2 minutes, and I'll follow her suggestions to speak on agriculture. Now, if you look at the agriculture, which is one of the very important agent, and when the finance minister started speaking, I had a lot of expectation that agriculture is going to get huge fund. But surprisingly, if you look at the allocation, now for agriculture, 1.32 lakh was allocated last year as per the budget estimate, and this time it has gone up from 1.3 lakh to 1.32 lakh to 1.37 lakh crore. But surprisingly, if you look at the revised estimation, you will see that financial year 24-25, 1.41 lakh crore was allocated to agriculture. But this time, 1.37 lakh crore. What does that mean? There is a decline in allocation for agriculture department by 2.5%. If you consider the inflation of 4 to 5%, I really don't know. Just 2 points here for agriculture. A lot of focus has been given on agriculture. A lot of different scheme, promoting 100 districts, promoting a lot of programs to boost the farmer income. But one concern which we want to explore from this, that how long we are going to just focus on increasing the income of the farmer. And I think we need to think really to improve the skill of the farmer. That's what we will also explore. So I'm very happy we have the we have the people who are from a very different fields. We have people who have significantly contributed in a policy making. I think we'll not be able to have any better panelists than this today's. So we are very grateful to have all of you here, sir. Professor Govinda Rao will try to give more insight on fiscal consolidation, public policy, and more importantly, how to overcome the disparity and inequality. Presently, he's working and he's guiding the government of Karnataka. Our distinguished panelist, Dr. Rumki Majumdar, will try to help us to guide us where we have reached in the macroeconomics and how the uncertainty in the world market is going to impact us. Dr. Gayathri Vasudevan expertise will help us to understand how the union budget 2025-26 is going to help us to achieve the, help the laborers, women, and other thing. And of course, Mr. Sridhar sir expertise will help us to understand the railways. We are very happy to have our Raghu sir as a moderator. He has been doing this job, and we are very happy to have you, us sir, as a moderator. I'll not take much of the time. This is the right platform to make a notes, and please try to understand how one has to look at the budget and just not focusing on the number. So with this, I complete my welcome address, and I'm looking forward to learn from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights on the Union Budget 2025-2026. Now I invite Mr. Raghu to take over this session.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to the post-lunch session, first of all, and it's really honored to have Dr. Rao, Dr. Vasudevan, Dr. Majumdar, and my good friend Sridhar as well here, right? So we are in an interesting situation now as Finance Minister, rightly from her lucid Tamil upbringing, talked about the Tirukkural. All the world looks up to the rain, but the citizens looks up to the king for whether the people who govern are hearing the voices of the masses is a very apt 2,000-year-old Tirukkural, which the Finance Minister spoke in her budget speech as well. There are a couple of answers for that. To an extent, the government has indeed heard, especially the Twitter warriors like us who keep clamoring for rebates, income tax benefits, multiple things. But the parallel-wise, there is a huge unorganized sector who are not on the Twitters, who are not on the Instagram, who are looking at equally support as well. Finance Minister has indeed played her cards in this tough scenario with a good amount of support for the so-called middle class as well. We need to figure it out whether the actual consumption will happen, right? So because she's talking about in a small sliver out there, it's not the huge population. Out of the 142 crore people, citizens, what we are, that the 12 lakh benefit goes to around maybe 10, 15 crore at the most, 20, yeah, so at the most, right? So it is a very, very small portion which we are banking on picking up the consumption with that kind of a benefit. But it is a very significant benefit she has come up with. Especially we have never heard in a budget of giving income boost to a section of population who can actually drive consumption. We need to see whether it actually drives consumption as well. That is one thing she has tried to address. And from stoking the animal spirits of the private sector is another significant thing, because in the past, nearly post-COVID, for example, the private sector has literally put the brakes on their investment in capital expenditure, and hence, in turn, employment generation, and in turn, supply and demand as well. But even as they have reduced their capital expenditure, they have significantly increased their profits dramatically in the past 3 years. But equally well, the wage increases for the employees as well as employment generation for the private sector has not caught up with the kind of profits the private sector has been making. So that's another significant aspect. The finance minister, since the past 8 years, this is her 8th consecutive budget she has given on Feb 1st, she has been trying to cajole private sector to invest substantially as well. But they are simply not biting the bullet of investing and creating more jobs. What is the option for the finance minister? The finance minister, of course, has her pockets. She is investing in capital expenditure, creating mega infrastructure projects in which the hope that this will generate employment as well. But parallelly, with consumption coming to a, not on halt, but a little bit of a reduction, there seems to be some sort of a revenue dip as well, because capital expenditure is increasing, revenue buoyancy is coming down. We need to see whether how the fiscal math will work out going forward, because the fiscal deficit, she is steadfastly, highly disciplined way in which she's trying to manage to bring down the fiscal deficit according to what India can be comfortable in. So these are the many challenges which she has, boosting private consumption, citizens from the world, increasing the animal spirits of the private sector, how she is able to manage capital expenditure and the private expenditure, revenue buoyancy as well. Plus, as Kedar said, we have a strong tariff king of the world who's stoking all sorts of fears, right? Fortunately, for people who are into bikes, Harley Davidson is much more cheaper now if you want to buy a Harley Davidson because of reduction of tax. Whether it will be enough for the US to hear that tinkering of the small way in which they have done is a question which we will address. We'll seek answers from the expert panel on multiple other options. And of course, agriculture is another one where the outlay has come down, but also a little bit about how rural employment and skilling of the farmers is another aspect which we will discuss further about. So I would request Professor Rao to have opening remarks on the fiscal imbalance and take it forward from there. Sure, please. Yeah. Or you want a mic there? I can give a mic.
No, I prefer to do that with blood circulation. Distinguished members of the panel, faculties and students of MAHE. Let me at the outset thank Manipal Academy of Higher Education for asking me to be present here and talk. How much time should I take?
5 to 7 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
5 or 10?
Sure, you can take 10, sir, please.
Yeah, so let me thank for the MAHE for calling me here. I've been, the moderator has suggested that I should talk about the deficits and debt, which I will also talk about some of the other things. To begin with, I will say some good things about the budget. And then, as usual, you know, economists are the worst lot. They will always have something to say, you know, something negative to say. You know, in fact, in the last 3-4 budgets, if one sees, there is a certain trend. Unlike in the past, there is a considerable amount of realism in the budget forecasts. Now, and that trend has continued. It's important because particularly the revenue forecasts, you know, the overestimation of revenue forecast can lead to tax terrorism. It happens because you have a higher forecast, you give higher targets to the collectorates. Collectorates go about really, you go all the way, right or wrong, assessing the people. And there is a law which says that 20% of, even if you dispute it, 20% has to be paid. So he pays 20%, and then he goes to the tribunal, and somewhere about 75% of the cases in the tribunal are decided in favor of SSCs. 78% in the high courts are decided in favor of SSCs. And more than 70% in the Supreme Court are decided in favor of SSCs. These are the numbers from the Controller and Auditor General. So revenue forecasts have to be reasonably good. And if you see the revenue forecast here too, it's not too high. It's about total revenue is expected to increase by about 10.8%. But then there is a small catch. The catch is on the income tax. Income tax is estimated to grow at a rate of 14.4%. But if you take into account the fact that 1 lakh crore giveaway has been done in terms of increase in the exemption limit and this thing, the effective rate of increase works out to somewhere about 22.4%. And so one has to be a little vigilant. Although the trend has been being realistic, There is a bit of a problem with income tax. I do hope they will be able to realize that, but I'm not too sure. The second issue is transparency. In the last few years, off-budget liabilities have all been brought into the budget, and there is very little of off-budget liabilities. So in that sense of the term, there is a realism in the budget. I mean, when you say that this is the deficit, you know that the deficit. In 2008-9, when the government gave three major decisions: pay commission application, loan waiver, and sort of expansion of national rural employment guarantee. The budget fiscal deficit estimated was 2.4%, but then ultimately, when you took into account the off-budget liabilities, ended up with 7.5%. And so, in that sense, there is no hidden thing in that thing. The third important is she has continued to adhere to the fiscal consolidation. Now, whether this fiscal consolidation is enough, I mean, obviously she has to go by the realistic targets. Finance Commission has said that, on a normal course, we should have a fiscal deficit of 4.5% this year, in the coming year, and she has budgeted 4.4%. More importantly, she has also suggested that, she has given the target, in fact, taking debt as an anchor. She said the debt levels will decline from 57% currently to 50% by 2030-31. Not the deficit, you can work out the deficit, but then under some certain assumptions. But the important thing is debt is expected to come down plus or minus 1% to 50%. And the final thing is the capital outlay. And here again, she has maintained that particular almost 10% growth on capital outlay. And the capital outlay is expected to increase by about 10.1% this year. And she has continued to give 1.5 lakh crore to the states. And now, these are the important things that we need to keep in mind. But before I go further on this thing, one has to make sure, somehow or other you get a feeling when the budget reaches there that the entire world's problem, entire country's problem will be taken care of by the budget. Now, first of all, the economic policies done throughout the year, it is not just the budget that happens. Number two, the union government spending in total expenditure is just about 1/3, and 2/3 is spent at the state level. And to say that I will do so many things within this particular budget is always, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. Now, that's one of the major problems. Now, you take the rhetorics in the budget. She says, I will accelerate growth, secure inclusive development, invigorate private sector investments, uplift household sentiments, enhance spending power. I don't know what all things can be done. This is more in the nature of rhetoric than your proposals don't really lead to what is said. Now, talk about the Viksit Bharat. Because we have done a lot of work on that. We have written on that. In fact, I happen to be a managing editor of one of the journals. This is an online journal. It's an open access journal called Indian Public Policy Review. And there is in the latest issue, Rangarajan has made a very detailed calculations of these things. Anybody can just look at it. But the point is, even if you take the numbers given by the economic survey, 8% growth on an average for the next 23 years. I will not say it cannot be achieved, but it would require considerable reforms, which I am not sure they are able to carry through. Now, these reforms of various types, you need to make whole lot of factor market reforms, land acquisition. Now, don't forget the fact that almost 10 million people join the workforce every year. And if you want, and then 44% of the population of the workers is in agriculture, and they produce only 15% of GDP. And 43% of the workforce is in small industries, and 75% of the small-scale industries are in the units with less than 20 workers. Now, you want to do industrialization, you want to take scale, you want to increase the scale, because we always consider small is beautiful. Small is not going to be beautiful any longer. Small has to become medium, has to become large. If you don't become large, and if you don't focus on labor-intensive industrialization, you can't have the employment, you can't have the type of growth that you are really expecting. Now, that would 8% growth per year on an average requires your investment rate to be somewhere about 40%, assuming an incremental capital output ratio of 5. Now, now you have 32% of investment ratio. How are you going to achieve this? That is going to be a major challenge. So you need a lot of factor market reforms. You need to reduce the cost of borrowing for the businesses. The household sector financial savings now is 5.3%. And it's only the household sector financial saving that provides you the borrowing space. And if your fiscal deficit is somewhere about 7.5%, that is the amount of borrowing that you do is somewhere about 7.5%, 4.4% here, another 3%, because if you do the power sector reform, they can go up to 3.5%. So if you have 7.5, you take it, where is the money available for the private sector to borrow? And you have SLR, you have financial repression in that sense of the term. Now, and you financial repression because you want to keep the cost of government borrowing less. And then you can always say that my growth rate is higher than the interest rate that I pay, so my debt will come down. But the basic problem is that you are going to create a hell of a lot of distortions. Unless the borrowing cost comes down, you can't really increase this thing. And then, one of the reasons why most of the people are stuck, most of the companies are stuck with less than 20 workers is the labor laws. And people have been avoiding this by having, contract labor. And, in fact, my friends in the industry say that it doesn't matter, we'll have our own ways of doing it. Now, but the point is, if you really want to have a scale, if you really want to do something, you'll have to seriously think in terms of creating labor-intensive industrialization. Now, we did talk about MSMEs. OECD survey says that 2/3 of the people employed in new MSMEs have an educational qualification of less than higher secondary. Now, what is the amount of money that you are going to spend on skilling? Now, if you see all these various things that have been said, like we want to have zero poverty, 100% good quality school education, access to high quality, affordable, comprehensive health care, 100% skilled labor with meaningful employment, 70% women in economic activities, farmers making our country the food basket of the world. And then, you have the engines that you talk about. Again, I do not want to repeat what has been said in that. But the point is, what is the allocation? That was the question that was asked. Now, if you really look at agriculture as compared to the agriculture, fisheries, and animal husbandry together, the total is minus 0.57% increase. Is minus 0.7% from the revised estimate. And education and healthcare is a little more than, just about 12%. Now with this, and then don't forget the fact that agriculture is a state subject. Health is a state subject. It is not that the union government is supposed to be doing all that much, but then they want to claim that they are going to do this. And I think, so there is a lot of unsaid things, And it's more rhetoric than reality in that sense. And you know, certainly this is not going to create a Viksit Bharat. And fiscal consolidation, as detailed they may be able to achieve, but then I think we have a long way to go before we stabilize. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights. Now I request Dr. Rumki Majumdar to come up and take over the session.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Great. So I understand most of our audience is like just a graduate level, so I'll speak their language so that they can understand it better. You have economics course in your subject? Okay. Let's have some question answer series here. How many of you can tell me the demand equation from an expenditure side? What is the demand identity or equation from an expenditure side? Oh, okay, GDP. Can anybody tell me how is GDP calculated? Yes, please, ma'am. Yes. Excellent. C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Rings a bell? Yes, very good. Thank you so much. C plus I plus G. Consumption, personal consumption, investments, government spending. And government spending again has two parts to it. Can anybody tell what is it? It's one is consumption, one is investments. So government consumption and government investments. And I'll tell you why I'm calling this out. And then you have net exports. That is excellent. Export minus imports. Now, when you have a global uncertainties, which of these five gets impacted the most? Net exports. So that is export minus imports. Right now, currently, can you please tell me what is our next net exports? Is it positive or negative? X minus M, is it positive or negative? Does it contribute to the GDP positively or negatively? Negatively. Why? Lesser than our imports. Now what happens? Yeah, exactly. So now when you have a global uncertainty, when your demand for exports come down and at the same time your imports are going up, what happens to your X minus M? It becomes more negative, right? And if it's more negative, what happens to the GDP? It falls. Maths works? Right. So what I'm trying to say is when you have a global uncertainties, your X minus M in India most likely will fall, which will bring down your GDP. Then what is the thing that you must rely on in the equation? What is the rest of the equation? Give me the the variables that I'm talking about. C plus I plus G. And that is exactly the budget was trying to say. When you have X minus M becoming more negative, it's taking away your GDP. What are you going to rely on? C? Government spending. Exactly. And that is exactly what the government has been trying to do. If you look at the last GDP numbers, can you please tell me anybody what are the last 2 quarters GDP numbers? Okay, last fiscal year's GDP number. 8.2% YOY, right? What was the Q1 FY25 GDP number? Any yeses? 6.7%. This Q2? 5.4%. Have you seen the growth coming down? From an 8.2%, we saw 6.7, which was the election quarter. Then 5.4, which was the second quarter, which was the quarter when rain hit the activities. So there were 2 exceptional quarters. But now the problem is, if your x minus m is not likely to grow, you only have c plus I plus g to play with. And that's a government, and unfortunately C is not going up because inflation, because you do not have employment, right? You do not have real wages growing. How would consumers spend? How will you spend? When you have income in your hand, right? If you do not have income, you can't spend, simple. But where will the income come from? One, either you have to have employment, right? If inflation is controlled, otherwise an ice cream that you are buying at 100 rupees becomes 200 rupees, you probably will not be able to afford that ice cream anymore, right? Your inflation is hurting you. And of course real wages. If you have an employment, but you are getting 100 rupees every year, even though the inflation is at 5%. Your real wages is going down. Today 100 rupees, next year it will be equal to 95 rupees, even though in hand you are getting 100, correct? So that are the problems that India has been facing. 3 challenges. Income is not growing, employment situation is bad, and inflation is high. So that's where C problem happens. What happened to I? I told you, I asked you about government investments, right? So there's government investment and there is a private investments. What is government doing to boost investments? That is that they are getting resources to invest. But what is the government doing to invest? Sorry? That is money. I'm saying, where is it spending? When you say government investments, where is the government spending? In roads, railways, ports, right? Renewable energy, right? Energy, all the wires and all that you see, many of them are public sector, right? So that is where the government spends. And that's what, when you say government capex, that's what we are talking about. So government capex has been going up. So the GI component is going up. What happens to PI, that is private investments? Is it going up? You must have read private investments not picking up. Why do you think it's not picking up? Because there is demand issue. Yes. Why would a business, if you are producing something, for example, if you are producing, say, chips packets or ice cream, if you do not have a consumer for chips and ice cream, why would you produce? Simple, right? So you need to have a demand. And here consumers are not spending because they do not have real wages, employment, inflation. So investment stuck because there is no consumer demand. And then you have C plus I plus G, the government's government consumption, which it does for wages and salaries. That is a constant that government cannot do away with. So now they just have 2 elements to bank on: government investments, private investments, and private consumption. And that's exactly what the government, this budget, the government has tried to do. Boost consumption spending by creating employment opportunities, by creating, by helping many of the farm announcements that were made. Why? Why do you think they were interested in pulses? Why high varieties? That's precisely because they want to bring down food. Pulses has been the biggest culprit of food inflation. So pulses was their main focus, correct? So look at, when you look at budget documents, think what are the action points they are doing and why they are doing it. Try to relate it to very basic equation of C plus I plus G and plus X minus M. And you will be able to answer many of the questions. Why is the government doing this? Why pulses? Why high yield varieties? Why MSMEs? Why do you think MSMEs? What if they are not boosting MSMEs? 45 to exports, yes. 85, almost 85% to employment. So if you want employment, if you want exports, you have to boost MSMEs. So this is the rationale that they are coming back to. What are my pain points and what are the levers I should pull to make sure that my demand goes up? At what demand? domestic demand, that is C plus I plus D, because X minus M, there is nothing much we can do. If US is not willing to buy my stuff, there's nothing I can do. I can make my exports competitive, but if they don't want to buy, they don't want to buy. So you have those externalities which you have to deal with. And imports, of course, you have oil prices going up, your import bills shoots up. Right, so that's, if you are reading a budget, think from those perspectives, and you will be able to get a lot of insights of why government is doing what the government is doing. That's all I will pause with. Unfortunately, I just got a message. I have a personal exigency and I have to leave. But I'll leave it to the other panelists to continue with the discussion. I'm so sorry. I would have loved to be here, but something has come up and I have to rush. Thank you so much.
End. So thanks for your time, thanks for your support. I would now request Dr. Vasudevan to share her remarks on it.
So I think I will borrow from the way she was actually conducting it to talk to you. So she was talking to you on economics. Now let me ask you one of the things that everybody uses. How many of you order through Zepto, Swiggy, Amazon, Flipkart? All of you. Who are those workers? They're gig workers. What does the budget say about gig workers? Who are gig workers? Who are gig workers? Musicians. Gig is actually music, right? Where did the word gig come from? Where did the word, how many of you listen to music? Yeah? So all those who played music were gig workers. Now you have Swiggy, Amazon, all the deliveries, the beauticians, the cleaners are all gig workers. So it's very similar, right? They don't have continuity of work. They don't have an employer-employee relationship. Now what I'm going to do is going to read a list of things which the finance minister said in the budget. So assuming I'm an everyday person, what would I do with this budget? Is budget important or election important? Just think very logically. So there's something called e-Shram card, okay? There's something called Swanidhi scheme. Is it relevant to any of you? None of you want to be gig workers, guys. So that's why it's not relevant to you. But you order through Swiggy. You want to do good in life? Which one of you are evil people here? You want to do good, but then you can't pay the gig worker more than what the platform gives you, right? So therefore, what do you do? So the government said, I have e-Shram cards. It started it a couple of years ago, but that's growing. Why do gig workers, why is it saying, please go and register yourself in the e-Shram portal? So you get an identity, like the Aadhaar, you get an identity. If I was a gig worker, what would I do? I'll say, I hope Professor Govinda Rao advises correctly and puts some DBT into my account. That's what I would do, right? Because that's why I'll go and register. Because I come and sit here in the class to listen to Gayathri, are you nuts? I have to do it for my advantage. If I was a street vendor, what would I do? I'll go to the Swanidhi scheme. What does the Swanidhi scheme give to me? Loan. All your parents pay for your education? And what happens? Midterm in the month, paisa gaya. You have spent it on Swiggy, Zepto, ice cream, what is that called? Coldplay concert, everything gone. Correct? Now what happens then? You have to borrow. So where would you get the borrowing? Swanidhi scheme, Kisan credit scheme, all these Kisan card, all this when you read, remember they're saying you have ability to borrow. Now if you have ability to borrow, will your parents give you money if you are busting it on 5th of the month? You have to stretch it, right? So you have a bunch of things that they do for that. Interest subvention, guarantees, your professors here, will they keep you here if you're absolutely not going to pay your next semester fees? Think practically. Budget is everyday life. Don't think of budget. I studied in the same institute that Professor Govinda Rao was the director of. Can you imagine how he must have thought of me as a student? Because this is the way I was relating to the budget. And that's the thing, the beauty with the budget is think everyday issues. I'll give you a couple of other things. How many of you like guarantees? Credit guarantee, if somebody were to say. I pick up 2 of you. Would you guarantee him? Credit guarantee. Just don't say he's a nice guy. This guy next to you, the person, what's written on your shirt? Yeah, what's written on your shirt? Read it. Now, he's going to borrow from him. Will you stand guarantee for him? Why? Arey, he's your friend, he's sitting right next to you. So there is something called credit guarantee. Professor as well as Dr. Rumki came and told you that investment, MSMEs have to do investments, they need money. So people like me who run MSMEs require money. So we need credit guarantees, right? Now you turn back and say, she refused to give it to you as guarantee. बाप ने पैसे नहीं दिया, कहा कि बच्चा, you go do startup, go do it on your account. Don't come to me and ask me for money. My house is my house, I've built it. Then what do? You turn back to the bank and say, listen, there's a credit guarantee scheme. Will you give to me? That's credit guarantee for you. Right? So what I'm saying is, I can read out a couple of things. When you read it, look at the economic survey, look at the budget, and then look at everyday life for you. Do you see a laundry? Do you see a delivery? Do you see somebody who's a beautician? What are your everyday? She said pulses. Pulses is what? Dal. Just dal. Boring dal. Dal is the most expensive. What is the biggest problem dal has? Storage. Right? So you need more warehouses, storage. What do you do with it? Again, look at all forms in the budget, no? And, Raghu gave me a hint saying that don't be boring. So I was thinking to myself, what will I tell you which I possibly had the most difficulty in? I actually never liked the budget. That day was most boring. And everybody in my time used to put the TV on and listen to the budget. And I used to think to myself, what's the relevance in my life? Over time, as I'm running LabourNet and Sambhav, I've realized it's the most relevant piece of information for me. As an entrepreneur who's running a contract work company, where all of them are going to be on contract, right? With large manufacturing companies, with service companies, what am I looking for? Does the e-Shram card that they're going to register with 1 crore gig workers, is the government going to tax me? Am I paying for it or is the government paying for it? As an individual, what's important as an enterprise? I don't want to pay for it. You're the consumer, right? If all of you want to do good by the Zepto workers and the Swiggy workers, will you pay extra for their health insurance? Arey goli maro, your ice cream is going to be 20 rupees more expensive. Are you okay with that? You're not going to pay. You're the consumer. You're the employer, remember. This is not the 1970s Amitabh Bachchan film, okay? So there's no good person, bad person, angry young man, angry young woman. Nahi, each one of you are evil people. That 1 crore worker is all surviving because of all of us, correct? So now look at the budget in the context of what does the government need to do and what do we need to do. Government has to see people like, there are 100 more Gayatris. There are 100 more Bhavesh Agarwals. You actually need 1,000 of that and you need 10,000 of me. So that means each one of you, the question to all of you is, what's your dream? So it's saying entrepreneurship. Go, create jobs. If you create jobs, what do you have to do? Understand the budget. Who's giving you credit? If you have a farm at home, understand where all will I get the money from? So my money is saved, na? You don't want to be on the road saying I've done all this and then not have any money for yourself. So you have to look at it from the perspective of the worker, the unorganized worker, perspective of an MSME, and everyday life. That's the budget in simple terms. Thank you.
I would not request close friend Sridhar. He's passionate about railways and also, as he calls it, the hyped up consumption story which the budget spoke about, right? Sridhar, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for inviting me on this panel. So I would like to just highlight two aspects of the budget because that was what we were told to expect by our, I wouldn't say very useful media, because the experience since the budget, which I really want to say this because being a media person, I think we have been done a great disservice by our media, especially, I'm saying now in this context, about the budget, because euphoria is not a good thing. You know, to go over the top doesn't make sense. You can't make sense when you are high. So I mean, it's logical. So I will try to speak to you in a language that is reasonable, not what has appeared in the media, even though I am a media person. So there were two important expectations from this budget. There were lots of expectations, of course, but two were highlighted repeatedly in the media. One was about CapEx. What is going to happen to CapEx, capital spending, okay? And the other was, what about consumption? So these two things. So I'll just focus on this. Now, and with CapEx, I don't want to talk about CapEx in a very general sense because it will have no meaning. So I will take the case of the railways. And the reason I want to highlight the railways, I justify it for the following reason. The CapEx in the railways, first of all, before all this, there used to be something called the railway budget. Unfortunately, it has been jettisoned, ostensibly because it is a relic of our colonial past. But I want you to think about another thing, because you also study businesses. Tell me the railways is the nation's single largest employer, single largest enterprise, whether in the private or public sector, and tell me if you can think of one large private organization, you take the whole of the Tata groups, you take the whole of the Adanis, you take the whole of the Ambanis. Can you think of any company which doesn't have an annual general meeting to consider its performance? This is what the railway budget used to be, which we don't have now. And the second reason, the reason why I am talking about the railways at such great length is because about 22% of your CapEx, the central government's CapEx this budget, is going to the railways. So I am justified in focusing on the railways because it is the single largest recipient of capital expenditures of the government. Now, it is also very important to talk about the railways because, you see, one of the earliest economic surveys since 2014 estimated that what is called the investment multiplier. I mean, you must be familiar with the investment multiplier. Now, the investment multiplier in the railways is about 5. This is very high. A multiplier of 5 is very high. But it is logical, and it is very logical to expect a very high multiplier for the Indian railways because when the railways implements a capital project. Like, for example, what are these capital projects? You can lay a new track, you can build bridges for the railways to go through, you can, you can have signaling systems, you can have all kinds of things in the capex, but all of which the railways doesn't do it itself. It has a very high multiplier simply because the railway spends it and gets others to do it. So this is for the same reason. There used to be a very old argument, Dr. Govinda Rao will justify it for me, because the argument used to be, does private investment get crowded out because of public investment, or does it come in? In this case, there is absolutely no doubt to my mind that 1 rupee of investment draws much more from the private sector. So this is settled. Now, this is the reason for me to focus on the capex in the railways. Now, what has happened to capex in the railways? We had the capex for 2025-26, that is the budget estimate for the forthcoming year. That number at 2.52 lakh crores remains the same in the budget estimate for this current year, as well as the revised estimate for this current year, and is just about 2.25% higher than what it was in 2023-24. Now, why is this important? Why am I highlighting this? It's very simple. To my mind, the single biggest constraint in the Indian Railways today is its capacity. It is load-bearing capacity. How much it can carry. How much it can carry is a function of, so let me go back also to refresh your memories with the series of accidents that we had in the last 1 year. Since June 2024, there have been a spate of accidents, including one yesterday. You would have seen in your papers some pictures of them. The reason why this is happening is because there is a significant overloading of capacity on your network. I'll take you back to the 2024 Balasore accident. What happened at Balasore? Horrific death in which supposedly 300 people died, but I think the toll is much, much higher than that, because a lot of people who were traveling in the unreserved compartments, which is basically carrying migrant workers on this heavily congested route, this capacity, you know what is the capacity at which it is carrying load? It is running at 140, 150% capacity. What do you do when a network is so heavily overloaded? Okay, one. On top of it, you add some trains which are supposed to be really smart and fast and jazzy looking, and so what happens to that? You have to remember the average speed of a goods train in the Indian Railways is 25 kilometers per hour. The average speed of a passenger train on the Indian railway network is 50 kilometers per hour. So if you want to run a Vande Bharat, or even a Shatabdi, which is being run down now, you will have to take these trains off the track. When you do that, you are actually running at a lower capacity than what you are currently running, because a lot of that is your goods traffic. When you remove goods traffic out of on the network, off the network, what happens is that the railways earns even less, because passenger traffic is subsidized by goods traffic. Be that as it may, what has been the performance of the Indian Railways? It is shocking. It is shocking that the Indian Railways carried fewer passengers and lesser freight in 2023-24 compared to 2021-22. Does this mesh with this whole scenario of India shining, India growing rapidly and all that? It doesn't make sense to me. So this is the problem. So you have capex, which is, you have capex which doesn't address these things. And then on top of that, your you're basically, since you have constrained your capex, your new lines, your what is called track doubling, and what is called track renewals. Track renewal is basically what? As your tracks age, you have to replace them with new tracks because they no longer fit to carry. And that is said to be one of the reasons for these accidents that are happening. The overloading of capacity, I mean, you're basically flogging whatever you have of the network without expanding capacity. And on top of that, you have these fancy projects to run faster trains, a few faster trains, which makes this thing worse. So this is what, I'll leave you there, and then we can come back to it if we have some questions. But I just want to end with this thing on the consumption thing, because I find this extremely distressing as somebody who studied basic economics. The fallacy of the boost to consumption. One of the biggest things which have been highlighted by everybody else here is that there is the underlying thing about the Indian economy and as far as consumption and income is concerned, the defining characteristic of the Indian economy is inequality. If you have gross inequality, and we know that it has got worsened after the pandemic, what happens in such a situation? So the basis for your consumption is very skewed. You have a large number of people with very less income or even or no income at all, and then you have a very sharp, very short but huge spike where you have so this is what is reflected in the number I said, 26 lakh SSEs who pay 2/3 of our income tax, and they constitute, I mean, these 26 lakhs out of about 756 lakh taxpayers in India, income tax assessees. So this is really the thing. So these are people with income above 5 lakhs. Forget about 12 lakhs and all of that. They don't even figure here. So I'll take you back to what is India's GDP, nominal GDP. I don't want real stuff. You know, what is nominal GDP? What is nominal GDP? In the current year, what is the latest estimate? 324 lakh crores. 1 lakh crore giveaway as income tax is what? How much of it? 0.34%? Something like that? Okay? Now, some of you must have heard of the consumption multiplier. Have you heard of the consumption multiplier? Have you heard of the consumption multiplier? So it operates in the same way. How do you calculate the consumption multiplier? You take nominal GDP, you take how much it has grown. Consumption is one of the constituents of your GDP, no? There's consumption, there is export minus import, that is what Dr. Rumki spoke about. But before that, there is private final consumption expenditure, that's the biggest chunk of your GDP, that is about 56%. Then there is government consumption expenditure. This is another big, this is about another 10% or so. About 66 to 67% is these two. Then you have gross fixed capital formation, which has been stagnant in India for the last 10 years and more. That's about 30%. So you have the whole of your GDP here in these three pockets. Now, if you take consumption, the rate of change of consumption in GDP divided by the rate of change of GDP itself, you know, that gives you the multiplier, simple. What is that multiplier in India? I calculated for the last 10 years. I removed a couple of outliers during the pandemic because it was showing grossly high numbers because of the negative, both two negatives cancelling each other out. So I removed those, and I got a number of 1.3. Okay, the multiplier is 1.3. I spoke about railways for 5, and this is 1.3. So what does it give you? It implies a maximum of 0.41% increase in nominal GDP. Nominal GDP. all these growth rates we were talking about are in real terms. So you can figure out where that goes. Okay? Now, apart from this, there is in any stimulus, whether it is by government spending or whether it is income, whether it's tax stimulus or whichever kind of stimulus, there are always leakages. Okay? Suppose government spending creates a stimulus. Suppose a part of that stimulus goes in buying things from overseas. That's a leakage of the stimulus, no? So you can apply the same logic here to this stimulus in the consumption side also. So what happens? One is that a lot of these incomes at the very high echelons of the income scale are not even going to spend it. You think somebody with 20 lakhs is going to buy chips? I mean, are we serious about this? I mean, are we serious about thinking that these guys are going to spend on something that is going to revive the economy or something? Or are they going to spend, put it back into the stock market or wherever else they want to? So that is a big leakage. Given that this income is so heavily skewed, this makes it a very serious constituent of this so-called expectation of a boost, which is not going to happen. Then there is high inflation, given the things that Dr. Rumki also talked about, that the high inflation is going to be a major factor. And if these same guys who we were talking about on the 20 lakh scale are going to buy things, suppose they're going to buy an Apple phone, which they didn't want to, they were so frugal, they didn't want to buy an Apple phone, they're now going to buy an Apple phone, and so what? So there's a leakage because of that. There is an inflation because of the imported cost of it is going to be higher, and so on. So that there it goes, the thing about inflation. Whereas at the lower levels of income, the mass of the rest of the population, their incomes are going to get even further reduced. So that's as far as it goes. On top of this, we have already seen, we don't have a more recent comprehensive estimate of the extent of indebtedness in Indian households, but various indirect estimates, field surveys, and everything else shows that the extent of indebtedness is increasing. So whatever the increase may be, suppose because of this tax concession you got some higher disposable income, if it is going to retire those debts rather than result in consumption, you are left nowhere. So these are the things that, I mean, see, as a journalist, my job is to be skeptical. My job is to be skeptical so that that's my job. I mean, I'm not paid to, those in power, authority, and privilege don't need protection. I don't have to argue their case. That's not why I'm a journalist. And so you should remain skeptical. Always question, especially those in authority. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. So, Dr. Rao, economic survey a day before the budget told the government get out of the way, right? So, we had seen 1991 they stepping out to an extent, and economic survey made a logical, very strong case saying that it has to be much more away from the private sector to thrive and then drive the consumption. Has the finance minister listened to the economic survey and has she taken it forward further?
Yeah, in fact, always appears, it's not for the first time, it always appears that economic surveys, people don't really bother about what budget does, or budget does, people don't really listen to what economic survey does. Economic survey did a very sensible statement. I'm not for a moment saying that we should not have regulation, but have trust. In fact, what is lacking is the trust. And for everything, you suspect. Now, regulation is necessary because you need competition to be efficient. You don't want oligopolistic competition. And if you don't want oligopolistic competition and you want the markets to behave, follow the rules of the game, you need to have the regulation. Now, in our problem, in our system is government doesn't do what it should and it does what it should not. The capacity of the government is very limited and it should focus on governance. It doesn't focus on governance. I mean, you have, sort of even in income tax, you have pending income tax arrears for more than 30 years. I think possibly it's the time for them to just say that no, this we can't recover, and then clean it up and then say that let us focus on the new one. And then make the system simple and transparent. Now, and then again, it's not the business of the government to run business, but it is the business of the government to regulate. And that it doesn't do. And that's one of the major things. One of the things, I'm one of those chaps who always likes markets, let me put it so, but then regulations.
True.
Now, just as they said that we get out of the way, I would have also said that, all foreign investment will have an automatic approval route, except in these areas, rather than saying that all are exempted except in these areas. All are controlled except in these areas. Multi-brand retail. No, we don't want to get it because we want Ambani's to continue. I'm sorry for saying this name, but the point is the local domestic, sort of big businesses don't want a multi-brand competition from them. But if you really have a multi-brand this thing, it's one of those employment generating things. Yeah. We've been talking about it for a long time. Now and then there is one other thing in this. You think that the substitution for regulation is ownership. So if you own, you don't have to regulate. Now that's a very bad thing to do. That's what happened in the commercial bank system. The regulation failed, but because you owned it. True. And it happens in many other things. You take the case, you take the case of MTNL and BSNL. What business do they have to pay? Not in this budget, but generally 70,000, 80,000 crores every year to keep it afloat. You do need regulating, there is a oligopoly, but then MTNL, BSNL is not a competitor anyway. So I think there is a lot of sensible things which our economic survey does. But as I mentioned earlier, budget indulges more in rhetoric. Now, just to continue with what he said, this 1 lakh crore of tax, it's a good cosmetics. Delhi elections are on today. Yeah. It's a good cosmetics. But then, if you really look at the number of taxpayers, to make a small correction, you see about 5 crores people have registered and 2.5 crore people actually pay the tax. Now, anything that you do is any fine tuning that you want to do is with regard to these people. And then you want equity. That's another big problem. You want, a fine tuning of equity with 7 rate structure. I mean, you are trying to do it with only this sort of 2% of the population. Yeah, 98% of the population you are not touching. And reducing the incomes of the rich is not going to increase the incomes of the poor. Let us understand that. What you need is a significant empowerment of the people through skilling, education, healthcare, and that has to be done in the expenditure side of the budget.
Exactly.
Now, but then, it's an anithma to say that the tax has to be, you should reduce the progressivity of the tax system. In the United States, Peckman and Oakner did a time series study for several years and came to the conclusion that the US tax system is not progressive. Now, I mean, this is a summary version. But then look at the way we do it with GST. I mean, it's a scandal if one really thinks about it. But in any case, as I said, to say that multipliers, consumption will increase and the multipliers will happen, with this 1 lakh crore is not going to happen. But it plays a good cosmetics and you can win elections with this.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you, sir. Dr. Vasudevan, you are working with gig workers, unorganized sector in a larger way. So from a consumption perspective, we all are all on board saying that it is of a small benefit for the entire population. Instead of tinkering, should the FM should have worked on indirect taxes more, bring down the prices more, bring down the tax regime less so that the GST is reduced, and hence consumption multiplier is much more better, especially from the unorganized sector who, for example, Zomato CEO recently said that on an average gig worker earns around 26,000 rupees a month, right? So should, instead of focusing on a small sliver of population, should the taxes regime itself should have been reduced so that a larger population can benefit from the cost coming down? How does the unorganized sector can benefit from this?
So I actually can't answer the question. So I'll tell you from the unorganized sector worker perspective.
Yeah.
How many of you go to beauty parlors or salons? All of you go? Some of you take home service? Do you know what is the biggest problem they face? Is assuming, and I will later show you on my mobile as we do it in our app, right? If there is a service for 100 rupees, then they will say that what does a company like mine do? We will keep 30 rupees away. The larger companies will keep 50 rupees away. In 50 rupees, and I'm just simplifying it because I'm taking 100, 18% will go as GST. The remaining will go to the company, platform, whatever you want to call. So as a worker, I actually don't want to pay that 18%. That's the only way I'll get more money in my hand. And that's the argument for the people. So what has government done? Increased, in the name of skill training, it has also increased apprenticeship budgets. So if you look at apprenticeship as a skilling or internship as a skilling, fundamentally it is giving more money to the in hand of the worker for the big company. And this is across private sector, public sector, manufacturing, services. Apprenticeship is picking up because for them, they don't have to pay social security. Many of you may have parents who would have said PF, Provident Fund, gratuity, these are all there. For lower level, you will have something called ESI, which is your equivalent of your health insurance. This does not happen. So if you don't have that, your consumption is higher because your income is higher.
True, yeah.
Now, the challenge that is there is, let's take that figure. The 26,000 is actually the highest earning.
Okay.
So the average who are coming entry level in manufacturing, or in all the factories that we know, right? It can be Tata Motors, Mahindra, Ola, Ather, doesn't matter. I'm taking auto companies, but take pharma, it doesn't matter. Any manufacturing company, any service company will be between 14,000 to 17,000. With overtime, you'll move it to 22,000. So that means a large number of young people who are working are actually in the 14 to 22,000. Now, for them, what money they get in hand is what they're going to consume. Where will they spend? House? Migrant workers, so they have to come, they have to stay somewhere. So all your industrial estates, this is a beautiful area actually. I mean, when I was young, I'm from Bangalore, I never knew there were universities here. Now you have 10 universities in this area. So you are migrant, a lot of you are migrant here. You're not native to this place. You may come from Bangalore, but you're still 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers away. Some of you will be across states, across districts. The people who are serving you, a lot of them will be migrant. Now for them, it is the house that they stay. It is the income that you create, right? That's how income gets created. So I think we need to see it in light of that. And the worry that India has, and when, you know, and I am again, you know, I always think India today has this beautiful thing called so sorry, right? When I'm sitting next to people like Sridhar and Professor Rao, I often feel like the so sorry figure. I'm saying, okay, listen, what am I saying here? But let's come down to what is affecting us. Consumption is about everyday human being deciding where he or she should spend money on house, on food, on mobile, on bike. This is what they're spending money on. And today, TV also, they'll stop spending so much. You can see it on a mobile. Why do you want to buy? So it will go like that. Whereas bikes have become important, right? When MGR said every Thai, I will give a cycle, everybody said, wow. But today, everybody wants a bike, right? A two-wheeler bike has become the thing. If women ride it, better. Shakti scheme comes, better. I just want to say one more point and I'll stop. Government spending is a very complex one. And just let's simplify again. Government will say state government, central government. Again, I'm just simplifying, right? Let's take education, which I'm aware of. It will say, okay, for education, I will give centrally sponsored scheme 100 rupees. Now, in this 100 rupees, it will say, sir will come and tell me, I will give you 40 rupees, 60 rupees, you give 40 rupees. Now, by the time government tendering happens, just school. Let's not complicate. One university, one school, let's take, because they've said they will give in IITs, they've said they'll have more, I forgot, IIT or health, so one of the things they've said, and Atal Tinkering Lab. Now, he's supposed to give 60, I'm supposed to, as state, he's giving 40, right? Now, look at the complication here. The tendering will take time. The tendering is supposed to give what Sridhar very rightly said in railways, it's going to somebody. Somebody has to construct that skill. That means a construction contractor has to do it, right? Ideally, then JSW as steel company, you have to buy steel, you have to buy polycab, you have to buy anchor cable, you have to buy syntax tank. It's all consumption, right? That's what government is hoping to do by spending. Now it is at 60-40. Now in 60-40, it has said in 1 year. By the time tendering has happened, etc., it is 7 months. So it's become now 1.5 years or 2 years. There's time extension. Government has not considered what escalation will be. Central government has said like your parent, I can only give you this much, boss, or nahi dena mujhe. Now state government has said, according to the standards I've had, that standard person is some human being like me, went and said, listen, you can't do it for 5 crores, you please spend 7.5 crores. Now government is saying, central government gave 2 crores, state government has become 60-40. State government says, I don't have money. I don't have money, then what happens? Debt. This is the problem in government spending, is where I'm coming from. Yeah. Where things get stopped, where it gets stalled, where we get irritated. Everyday life is, imagine if I was the contractor there, I'd get irritated. Polycab is not getting its order. It's getting irritated. Everybody will get, tempers go high because of these reasons and we get skeptical. But the reality is there is a, you know, I often feel it's a very complex business. So the complexity we have to see through simplification. How do I get it out of the way? Like what parts of it do I simplify? And that's where I think tech, private sector, we have to come in and say, listen, let's simplify this. Then only we'll have consumption higher.
Right, yeah. Sure, please, yeah. Please, yeah.
No, I mean, you gave the example of education, centrally sponsored scheme in education. there is a detailed study that was done on this, on 3 centrally sponsored schemes for the Niti Aayog by me. This is National Health Mission, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee. The report is available there. More than, you say, in fact, central government gives some advance money. I mean, then this, for the approved projects. First of all, approval has to take place. More than everything else, there are 26 different budget heads within Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Because there were several centrally sponsored schemes. They have all made it umbrella schemes. So you have to have a separate, the state is supposed to prepare separate budget head for uniforms, textbooks, and, whitewashing, classrooms, toilets. There are 26 such, categories. And after this thing, that is approved, something like 30% of what they are required to pay, the center will send 30%. And then the state government has to put in money. Then they have to send the utilization certificate for the remaining money to come. And you cannot change these 20, so whatever you allocated to different. So it's a much more serious problem with the centrally sponsored schemes. Okay, that's one of the reasons why in the 14th Finance Commission we said that specific purpose transfer, centrally sponsored scheme is a specific purpose transfer from the union to the state, is supposed to ensure a minimum standard of service. You define a service, and once you define a service, and not that you'll have to have, there used to be, at that time there were, 60 different centrally sponsored schemes, which were consolidated earlier from 247. And then that was later consolidated into 28. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that not one of the centrally sponsored schemes, they define what is the level of service that they have to achieve, and then the target is not, you don't have to set the target, it's just spending. It doesn't make any sense, and you create complications. You don't have trust. You don't trust the states. Forget about the people.
True, yeah.
Union government doesn't trust the states. Now, and then you are talking about the trust. I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Dr. Vasudevan, one more question I had from, especially we have fresh graduates who are likely to get into the world out there. After the last year elections and the interim budget, the finance minister announced a so-called flagship scheme of interns programs in which the government of India will support with the private sector as well. So that was a so-called flagship thing in which she announced 2,000 crore kind of an outlay, but as we know, it's hardly sputtering out to around 300 crore as we speak now. That's one program, and the second thing is employment-linked incentive scheme for the private sector. Earlier it was PLI scheme in which you put out a certain level of production, then you get some incentive. The next she brought in with the employment-linked generation as well. So at least 2 of these schemes from an internship perspective and from an employment perspective, the private sector, how do you think these 2 schemes are actually benefiting the, as Sir said, 10 million graduates getting added every year into the workforce, right? So is it working at all? What are the pain points in how can we solve that problem?
So my honest answer is I'm not a major fan of it, okay?
Okay.
I'll tell you the major fan of the scheme. I'll tell you the problem with it. I don't think it's for any of these people. The internship scheme will be picked up at the lower end. India has 1,000+ universities. So the universities and the colleges at the lower rung, I'll just give you I'll go through an example. Day before yesterday, I was in Medak. Medak is a small district town close to Hyderabad, not very far from Hyderabad. Big city is Hyderabad, maybe 2 hours from Hyderabad. Great roads to Nizamabad. The highway is great. Investments come out well. Medak is average. Every single person in my training center said, I want to be a software person. Now this person has not even touched a computer. So, we're teaching them typing in order for them to get speed. The internship scheme will come in for all of these people. When they apply, They will come in as what we call chat executives, regional language chat executives. So I'll give you an interesting one. You all have heard of matrimonial sites. So people like us look for jobs in matrimonial sites, because those are jobs which can be taken to tier 2 cities. Telugu speaking, any of you are Telugu speaking, want to look for a groom or a bride, please tell me. My MEDA candidates will probably be the ones which is relevant. But where I'm coming from is internship schemes will be largely there. So the service companies, the Unilevers and the Olas and Biocons, etc., are likely to take it because they will get 5,000. Now the 5,000 rupees, there's a lot of confusion on how that 5,000 flow is going to happen. But like in apprenticeship, it is going as DBT. So that means I am the contracting company, right? LabourNet is a contracting company. So it doesn't come, we do the service for it and it goes directly to candidates. So what government is attempting to do is it realizes it's having educated youth. When I'm saying educated, they may be 12th pass. They may not be graduates. Some of them are constantly, we hear, paper chut gaya. That means one paper they've not been able to finish. They're ITI candidates, college graduate candidates. And I constantly say, it's a lottery that you're born here. This auditorium is your lottery, right? You went right. At lunch, Professor Govinda Rao was saying where he studied and how he came up in a government school. Today, you wouldn't be here. So I think that's the point I would like to make, is that it's a different world today. So the internship and the apprenticeship. So I'd like to say, he said on the central government, I simplified it consciously because it's too complex, but I think it's a politico-administrative problem. Okay. So, the political has to say jobs are there. Otherwise, there can be riots if you say, I'm not going to do enough for young people. Young people have dreams. So I think, therefore, every budget is a politico-administrative, but you are young people. Don't look at it completely with skepticism. Look for what's good in it. This is the time in life you should be idealistic, I feel. So look for the good in it and then see how you're going to use the good. The bad is going to happen, it's any society functions like that. I mean, I often tell myself, okay, we're not Argentina, boss. It's okay. Let's live my life peacefully and let's go, right? I think that's what I would say. So sure. Do I like the schemes? I often feel it's not the right thing, but then I'm in my 50s, mid-50s, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, sure. Sridhar, you want to say? Yeah.
See, I just wanted to, since you mentioned the PLI scheme, and I'm not an expert on these, but I have studied to some extent the vaccine industry, the 5G technologies, and to some extent the semiconductors. What makes these industries tick? You see, this PLI scheme is, you are not catching the bus you missed 30 years ago. It's not the same bus. You have to do something to get onto the thing so that you make something better out of it 5 years down the line. Instead, for example, even the Prime Minister spoke about the mobile phone PLI. What exactly are you doing with that PLI? Apple phone will make now we are on i16, it will make i17. You will be a contractor for Apple. You will produce whatever he tells you to produce, and you will know only that. You would not have traveled an inch on that road to do something better, for which I think it is important for the government, for the state, to invest seriously in take an ecosystem approach to these industries. We talk about China, we talk very flippantly about, oh, they can do it there because it's all force, it is authoritarian, all that rubbish, Actually, it's rubbish. Because I just did some deep investigation into deep sea, and I wrote something recently. It is fascinating what they have done.
True.
They have completely upended the existing global model, which has been set by all these other companies, OpenAI, Microsoft, all that. I'm not saying you do what the Chinese are doing. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you learn from whoever is doing the best. There is plenty to learn from everywhere. You are not the Vishwaguru. Sorry. You are not the Vishwaguru. There are other gurus around the world who don't call themselves that and are doing better, so better learn from them. So that I think that so you, in order to do that, build that ecosystem, what do you need? One of the things we have to get out of is this cheap labor business is not the road to salvation. This will not take you anywhere. And for that, you need to invest seriously in education. And I'm not talking about a few MAHEs and things like that. I'm talking about serious education at the classroom level. And which is why one of the things I forgot to mention when I was talking about CapEx is that there is in our country a fetishization of what is CapEx. That CapEx is good, revenue expenditure is bad. This kind of a mindset, you know, fed to us by the so-called technocrats, you know, basically. But that, you know, you don't spend money on revenue. Now tell me, if you have a school, you can build all the schools and all the campuses you want. If you don't have teachers, you're not going to do anything. You can build all the hospitals with the best, facilities and the latest scans and everything else. But if you don't have doctors, paramedical staff, nurses, all these other things that which is what revenue expenditure is. That is recurring expenditures. Expenditures that have to be undertaken on a regular basis. If you don't do these, and this is very important if you want to move in the direction of building that ecosystem that I'm talking about. So the state, like for example, the whole of the East Asian tigers, what they call them today, they built these ecosystems. Taiwan, I'll tell you, Taiwan started on the semiconductor bandwagon. Today TSMC is one of the leading chip makers in the world, and they started on the bandwagon by buying a defunct American company called RCA. You may remember, sir. They bought this dying American they were at the time making technology which was at the fag end of its life. But nevertheless, they got onto that, they used that as a starting point to move on this journey. But what did they do? They also built an ecosystem, meaning the state builds labs, the state funded universities, and in turn it drew private capital into that ecosystem. It set conditions for private capital. Private capital couldn't do whatever it wanted. It was enforced, there was some enforced discipline on it. It's not as if we don't throw freebies like this. I think we need to have an ecosystem. Then you will have people moving up the thing. I mean, it is nothing to celebrate if your worker is getting 12,000 rupees or 14,000 rupees in Bangalore. It is pathetic. I mean, there is no glory in that.
True.
That I was smart, I bought something so cheap. What the hell?
Great. Yeah, sure.
Come in just 1 minute. I
Yeah.
think he's so right on that, you know. I just want to give you an example of what the world thinks of us, right? So I don't want to name the company, but the very interesting one was, they're a watchmaker, premier watchmaker. They said, India, we can give you the mold, you will do. China can design the mold. So when we were asking, saying, can we train according to what you require, they said, you don't have the design capability. There's a very famous professor called Deepak Jain, who was the dean of Kellogg's, it's a business school of Kellogg's. He said one of his best stints as a vice chancellor was actually in China. And China gave him an award for being a best academic and building that university up. The university actually invested in research. I think our problem is often that we are not willing to take the hard work that it requires to build. And I often think to myself, right, we have so many polytechnics, all of them want to be engineers. I mean, I work largely in that area, so I'm again and again going to the auto. But the point I'm making is, why aren't we training all of them to be trainers and teachers? We don't have teachers. But we don't think that's a good one. I don't know if you've seen a movie called Badrinath Dulhania Le Gayi. It's a terrible movie, but very interesting one was, the girl is studying, the boy isn't. And that's rural India for you, right? They're all getting educated, they're all having aspirations. But I think the lack of investment in the education, the real education, for us to apply, for us to do what we want, is the important one. We have to be analytical. That's very critical.
Yes, sir.
No, unfortunately, I don't want to talk about MAHE, but generally the institutions of higher education, mostly funded by the government, the teachers take them as a job, and that's the end of it. Nothing more that happens. Now, I happen to be chairing a committee, and there is a university in Kalburgi. I asked a question. You're all very learned people, great people. Why is it that one person, you have an economics department on top of it, not one person has put together some write-up saying that these are the reasons why we are backward? Now then I gave the example. This is generally spoken about third world countries. Latin American education is called Paulo Freire. He said education in third world countries is knowledge contained in the textbook of the teacher is passed on to the notebook of the students through the process of chalk work without entering into the mind of either. Now, in Orissa, in fact, recently, Niti Aayog has come out with fiscal, health index. And the principal after that, one of those fellows from ISEC. In fact, when I was the director, I wanted to rusticate him for some other reason, but that's a different issue. Now, when you are looking at the fiscal, health, you can look at it from the union point of view, you can look at it from the state point of view. Macroeconomic stabilization is predominantly, not exclusively, predominantly a union function. So debt, deficit and all that when you are talking about, you are basically talking about from the point of view of the center. But the level of expenditure on education, level of expenditure on healthcare, the provision of public services is the state thing. In Orissa, in most of the universities, there is only one permanent teacher. They don't have permanent teachers. They call the people on the college lecturers on contract. College lecturers, and they're called as guest lecturers, and then they do the teaching. In fact, our own friend Bhanumurthy did the same thing in Ambedkar School. He has done that, the same thing he has been doing. He was the vice chancellor there.
Yeah.
And college lecturers are being taught, and I have taken 2 kids from there to work with me, and they know nothing about what to do. Now, that is the problem, where there is a huge, cutting down expenditure because you want to cut down your fiscal deficit. He talked about a revenue expenditure. I'm talking about really expenditure which adds capital to the people. We want to be fiscally prudent. That's where we have the problem. Yes.
We're running out of time. I'll open up one more subject with you, sir, especially given that you're speaking about center and state, right? So the federal structure has been questioned along, especially from Tamil Nadu, Karnataka as well, we have been calling. But finance minister seems to have taken up on the frown, on her chin, and tried to placate, I think to an extent in the budget, 1.5 lakh crore interest-free loans, electricity reforms, global capability centers pushing into the tier 2, tier 3 towns. There are 4 or 5 various initiatives in which she is trying to build a bridge towards the state who are not only the non-BJP states or the non-NDA states, but she is trying to placate all the state governments by offering at least some major initiative, right? So devolution is on the corner. You have a larger issue coming up in that sector as well, and Karnataka especially is telling, I am paying 1 rupee, I am getting very less for the development of the state. So is FM, has she tried to mend some roads or trying to build roads, or is it enough, or what more she could do in this context?
You know, it's a subject which is very vast.
True.
And there are no easy answers to these. You know, the moment somebody says, and any politician comes up and says that I am giving 10% more in devolution, he must be sent to the, mental asylum. You know, we have a convention in this country that the Finance Commission makes a recommendation, and this is not a charity.
True.
This is the rights of the state to get that particular money. And Finance Commission, in its wisdom, considers that this is the expenditure requirement of the state, need of the state, and therefore it makes a recommendation on tax devolution and grant.
Absolutely.
And to come up and say that I have given you 10% more, now, and you know what has happened there is that in the revised estimates, what have do they give according to some estimates, and when the Controlling Auditor General audits it, you know, there is some listing. So they say that this is prior period adjustment, they have added something. So they have not given any extra money to anybody, and they have given the money that has been recommended by the Finance Commission, and there are problems with the Finance Commission's recommendation as well. I will not go into those issues. Karnataka has obviously a problem because the moment you take distance from the highest per capita income as one and give 45% weightage to that particular factor in the tax devolution, Karnataka's per capita income has risen very high. Now that problem is likely to come up, and that is the reason why when I am helping the government, I said that you have to say that basically you are taking per capita income as a proxy for taxable capacity. And obviously they are getting only the consumption taxes, it is not the income taxes, so obviously this is not the way. Anyway, that's a different issue. But apart from that, and I will also say that this giving money through the centrally sponsored schemes is an intrusion into the state subjects. In fact, that is one of the reasons why in the 14th Finance Commission, where I was one of the culprits, we actually increased the tax devolution through the automatic route and said that cut down on the centrally sponsored schemes, have 3 or 4 schemes, so that you give substantial amount there rather than spreading it, thinly across several schemes. So, of course, that became a big issue. Oh, from 32% we went to 42%. Part of the reason is that the plan requirements plan grants had to be incorporated into the Finance Commission's formula. But anyway, now, so the issue is tax devolution and grants are not something which they don't have a choice. And as far as centrally sponsored schemes are concerned, I mean, there's a bad this optics, but still there hasn't been much of an increase even in the centrally sponsored schemes. Okay, there is not much of an increase. But as far as the central sector's spending in different states is concerned, Bihar will go to the elections next year. Bihar will get money.
Yeah.
Andhra Pradesh, they need more money in this thing. So
interim budget, they got more money. Yeah.
That's right. But apart from that, I don't think there is a great deal of things that has been given to the states.
Understood. Yeah, sure.
I mean, they've been very careful. I mean, railways will continue to, whatever little money they have, they will continue to spread around. But, and this 1,50,000 crores initially was done with a very different this thing. Article 293, one of the Constitution says that state government can borrow domestically, not internationally. And the next clause says that if they are indebted to the center, they have to seek the permission of the center to borrow. Now, our analysis showed in the 14th Finance Commission by about 2030, some of the states would not have any borrowing, would not be indebted to the center if the thing proceeded. So one of the best way to do is to give them interest-free loan and make them indebted to the center so that you can control the overall borrowing limit. So that's basically done. And states are not going to get more than 3% of GSDP. It's a part of the 3% of GSDP. But nevertheless, as far as the states is good because they are getting zero rate of interest. It's over a long-term period of 50 years. So everybody is happy.
True.
But there is an ulterior motive as well.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rao. Thank you, Dr. Vasudevan. Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you, Dr. Majumdar as well. She's not here. It can be a day-long session as well, Kedar. So with such knowledge out here, but unfortunately we need to call it a day. I would personally like to thank all of you. I'd like to hand over to Kedar for the final.
Thanks to the chair.
Thank you. Now I think we'll take a question. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, from
first of all, thank you everyone. It was great hearing two different insights. I've made notes of them. And I'm Ganesh and I'm pursuing economics and political science here. So I have two questions. First is to Sridhar sir. In the past year we have heard many incidents of derailments that happened of trains. Derailments of trains. Yeah. So one of the reasons that was the communication that like a miscommunication that happened between two different trains. So in this budget, is there any allocation that has been done to the communication system to make it more efficient? So the second question I have, like I know we have discussed about it a lot, because there is dip in net income tax, and also they have been given this like allowance of, there is no income tax till up to 12 lakhs, and that is set to increase the consumption. But in through the discussion, I understood it is not going to, it's not the major factor that would increase the consumption. So could I know from any of the panelists, what is the one thing that could the government have done to increase the consumption? So these are my questions. Thank you.
No. Should we take? The problem is you lose track of. Yeah, about the derailments. You see, this particular accident happened, not this particular accident, 3 of the major accidents since Balasore have been because of signal malfunctioning. Now, the disturbing thing is that in the railways, this number of accidents by cause used to be provided in a disaggregated manner, in a detailed manner earlier. Those are no longer available now. That is one. Secondly, people in the railways have told me, I have spoken to people in the signaling department and so on, what they say is that a huge number of derailments and signal failures are not even reported. You know, so that's one the scale of the problem. Now, signaling itself, the revised estimate showed a significant increase because in light of these accidents. But the forthcoming year's budget is absolutely flat where it was earlier. So the problem here is there is a backlog of signaling that has to be. If you remember, there was an instance, for instance, there was this Kanchenjunga derailment that happened. So the problem is that the entire route is not having automatic signaling. One portion of it is automatic signal, one portion is not. So people are not trained. So this is not, as I said, you know, the capex problem and the revenue problem are here. There has not been sufficient training of railway personnel, and loco pilots are heavily overworked. Let me tell you that I don't think, I mean, in this day and age, the railway loco pilots have been agitating for 50 years after the government had agreed in 1975 to limit the working day to 8 hours. They are now demanding a 10-hour working day. So this is the condition of this is not just capex, this is a whole lot of problem. There is prolonged neglect is the problem.
No, he was talking about the income tax thing, related issue. Now, see of the total income tax collections, this 1 lakh crore forms a very small proportion. Of the total consumption in the country, this 1 lakh crore doesn't form it's a minuscule. Now it is true that there is, it's not just that people up to 12 lakhs, 12 lakhs. So the change in the bracket and the rate structure will affect everybody, because the basic exemption limit itself has been increased from 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs. So everybody would have that 1 lakh difference. It's not just those fellows with the 12 lakhs. So to that extent, there may be some marginal improvement in their consumption. But as I said, the proportion of the people who are getting it is very small, and the amount of this thing that, this is not going to create he already mentioned the total impact of that on the GDP. It's not going to be one of the drivers of GDP in any sense of the term.
Good evening to all. First of all, thank you so much to all the panelists for giving us such insightful knowledge about the union budget. So my question is to Gayathri ma'am. So you had talked about different schemes like e-Shram and Swanidhi schemes and all. So one of the major things I feel is that there's a certain lack of information to the people like gig workers about these schemes. So how does your organization, or in general, how does government, work in transmitting this information to gig workers that they have these facilities which are being provided by the government? Because many people are unaware of such schemes. So how does your organization or government, inform people who are working in gig industry about these schemes, and how is it helping them? Like if you could give a broader perspective on that. Thank you.
So, it's a difficult question. See, I think it's the government's job to inform. In other organizations, everybody is a facilitator. The issue with the railways is the issue with the teachers is the issue everywhere, right? The question really is, are there enough people, and is the org structure good enough for it? So most schemes are said, and if you look at the outlays, it will be like very minuscule. Between allocation and spend, I give you 100 rupees, the allocation is 100 rupees. Actually, the expenditure will be 50 rupees. Because there's so many places where you're not able to take it. See, the e-Shram is a little bit more complicated. There has been a good uptake in the e-Shram compared to any other scheme. Because every single person in India, forget gig workers alone, is expecting a DBT. So I was in Odisha a few days back, okay. All the SHG women were called Subhadra. Government is transferring 10,000 rupees. 80 lakh women are going to get 5,000. By March 8th, they'll get another 5,000. So they're saying, okay, you get 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, whatever you will get, you will get. Now this will then go in for audit. Then the next year it will go for a CAG audit, X happened, Y happened, etc. So I think the schemes, in my opinion, need to be rationalized. See, the centrally sponsored scheme, why I gave you that example is, it is really very complex. The money does not reach. See, you were saying on the teachers, we did vocational education. You were asking on the organization, I'll come to Swanidhi in a minute, okay? So what we did is, we put vocational teachers in government schools. We didn't get paid. So then how do we pay the teacher? First year idealism, second year idealism, you've borrowed, you've paid, you don't want to delay salaries. By the 10th year, everybody's lost it. that means you will get poorer and poorer contractors even to come and put people there. So essential, in my opinion, you should not outsource essential things. See, I do run the NGO for sure. Sambhav does, and we do facilitate it. So, in my opinion, should we exist? NGOs need to exist, okay? I am firm opinion that there needs to be R&D. In my opinion, where is the R&D in social sector? Nobody goes to the field. Tell me, if I have to say a village has to be economically sustainable, who will do that? You have to have the blueprint for it. You have to have business finance for it. You have to have economics for it. You have to see what skills. Nothing can work without it, but we don't apply. But state has to be the one which is actually having enough personnel to do it. You can't have like half a person, quarter of a person, he and I will share a job, therefore it will get done, communication will happen, it won't happen. Say, Swanidhi scheme that you asked for, right? Let's take E-Shram. And E-Shram, you have to go to the labor office and register. One day it is going to take you to go apply in the portal. Another day you have to go to the Tehsil office and apply. So organizations like us will do like camps, right? We'll facilitate it, we'll send people and get it done. Swanidhi scheme is street vendors. I have to go to each street vendor, check the CIBIL score of the street vendor, because it's a guarantee by the government for the person to get the Swanidhi scheme. Now, it can be spent in only certain manners. For example, you can buy a solar in order to put on the street vendor cart, right? You can get an e-cart. So, there are things that can be used, it isn't. Then it is, where do you procure? So, there are also some ridiculous ones, like you said. Sir, I want to tell you the one which I find most ridiculous is t-shirts. We all have to order t-shirt from only single vendors, otherwise you will not get paid. So these are the kinds of things where it creates rent-seeking behavior, for lack of a better word. So in my opinion, the more, and that's why I said it is for us to bring that transparency in, is important. So I feel technology could be a route. I'm not an overly fascinated by saying it's only tech. It's a people plus tech plus process is required for this.
The question I had before, how do we increase the consumption? Like when I asked regarding the income tax, the follow-up question I had was, how do we increase, what's a better thing that the government can do to increase the consumption in the country? So that's it. Thank you.
See, if you are not going to, consumption comes from income, no? I mean, consumption is not the motive force for consumption is not autonomous, no? It's not coming on it by itself. It is coming from somewhere else. And what that somewhere else is basically income. And for that to run, you need other motors to be working. So gross fixed capital formation that I mentioned is about stagnant for the last 10 years and more. Basically, the private sector is not interested in it. I mean, every few months or weeks, you will hear bureaucrats from the finance ministry, you will hear Niti Aayog people, you will hear, ministers, everyone pleading, cajoling, begging, the private sector to invest. You will have, for example, in a few days, a global investor meet here. I have seen global investor meet for the last 15 years and more, and each of them is such a grand success that nothing happens after it. Because it is only a memorandum of understanding. You can't say that a private company must invest, no? So that doesn't happen. So unless, that is why I said, government capex can play a role. I said, if this motor is not working, then the government, this is what the standard theory says, that the government acts as a counter-cyclical force, pushes up investment on its own into capex through itself or through spending like the railways, or through its public enterprises or whatever, and then you jumpstart the economy. You know? That has to come from the consumption, cannot be a driver on its own.
Yeah, I'll just add to this what he said. You look at the numbers. According to the budget numbers, the nominal income is projected to increase by 10.1%. 25-26 nominal GDP is estimated 10.1% higher. And the tax revenue, income tax revenue, personal income tax revenue is projected to increase by 10.8%. Now, where is the increase in consumption taking place? I mean, just ask this simple question. I don't want to complicate matters. Your personal income tax numbers, if you see, it is 10.8% over the previous year. You know, whether it is due to force or whether it is due to voluntary compliance or whatever be the case, so you have this number. Now, if you take into account 1,000 crore, the 1 lakh crore, you know, sort of tax giveaway because of this change, then you are expecting a tax increase at 22%. That's the point I was making. So, don't expect, you know, either those numbers are wrong or the consumption, you know, I mean, there is some problem there, right? So, obviously, consumption is not estimated to increase so much. Government itself knows it.
I just want to add one more conundrum to this whole thing. See, there is something called nominal GDP, there is something called real GDP. Okay. That the CSO does all the other things and comes out with an estimate of GDP and so on. Okay. But every level of GDP, there is a relationship between the nominal and the real GDP. That is called the implicit deflator. Now, that implicit deflator is nothing but in economic terms, what it means is that is the level of inflation. You see, the other arm of the state, which sets monetary policy, is assuming inflation at 5 or 6%. But your GDP deflator is only 1.8%. So if you saw, suppose I was a serious student of economics and stuck to the logic in the analysis, and I say, no, I will go by the GDP deflator, and then you will have this level of GDP. So your whole monetary policy apparatus is misbehaving. You know, it is assuming a level of inflation which doesn't tally with the reality with the GDP numbers, or your GDP is constructed so badly that it doesn't, that relationship between nominal and real is broken, completely broken. Because it's 1.8 and that 5% or 6% which every quarter your RBI announces with fanfare has no basis in reality. You decide what the inflation is. And people, if you ask and feel what they feel about inflation, they will tell you what they feel, you know. I mean, they know what they face every day.
Consumption basically increase employment, create more jobs, public sector, private sector. Then comes there's a demand which kicks in if you have employment. The demand kicks in, the supply kicks in. That is the holy trinity you have to focus on. Create employment as much as possible. That is the bedrock of all economic of any country. So Donald Trump is talking about make America great again to create more jobs. We are talking about the same. So how do you create more jobs? That will kickstart all the economy. Consumption alone is not a single thing. The holy trinity you have to focus on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Badrinath, for expertly guiding us through this insightful and engaging discussion. As we wrap up this deep dive into the union budget, I would like to thank all our panelists for their wonderful insights for our students. This information is invaluable and would allow us to analyze, understand, and make the best decisions as informed citizens. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Swati Shivanan to deliver the vote of thanks.
So, as a social sciences researcher, scholar, and faculty, this was a delight. This panel was a delight for the kind of the diverse perspectives that you brought in, and the ways in which the panel used your expertise and communicated your expertise. So, it was a delight to see the skepticism, the realism, the critique, and also the hope that you were able to communicate to us and to our students. So I'd like to thank each one of you for spending your time here with us. So thank you, distinguished panelists. I'd also like to thank our HOD, Dr. Shilpa Kalyan, who had to leave for another meeting, for all the support that she's offered. A big round of thanks to Dr. Kedar for putting together this panel, these distinguished panelists, and also asking Mr. Raghuveer for moderating this, and what an excellent task that is to do. So last but not the least, I'd like to thank Dr. Anushri for the able support that she's provided, and as well as the students who sat here and listened to this and asked the questions that that is really the point of this sort of panel discussion. So thank you to the students for sitting here, listening to us, listening to the panelists, and particularly to the organizing team, Surya, Pritika, Navya, and Sonia, and Tanvi. So big round of applause to you guys, and we really look forward to working with you all again. So thank you again. Sorry, those of you who want to come in for a photo, please do come up on the stage. Thank you.